This jet looked like something from the future. It could take off standing upright, no runway, just a pilot riding raw thrust straight into the sky. If it worked, airfields would not matter anymore. After just 9 flights, it crashed and disappeared forever. The shocking part is not that it could go up. It is what it had to do to come back down. In the heart of the Cold War, every French airbase was a bullseye. Military planners stared at maps and saw not runways, but targets, long flat scars that could vanish in a single Soviet attack. The official doctrine, written in blunt language, warned that a surprise strike, nuclear or conventional, could erase the nation's fighter force before the first scramble order. France's air defense white papers from 1957 spelled it out. Survival depended on launching interceptors from anywhere. Forest clearings, farm roads, even city parks, anything but a runway. The logic was brutal. If you couldn't guarantee the ground beneath your jets, you had to rethink what a jet could be. This anxiety wasn't just theoretical. Across Europe, war planners ran simulations showing that a handful of well-placed bombs could crater every airfield in the country. The images from those war games are stark. Empty runways, burned-out hangars, a sky left undefended. For the generals, the old model, fast jets lined up on perfect tarmac, was now a liability. They needed fighters that could scatter, hide, and launch from improvised sites beyond the reach of enemy bombers. Helicopters offered some hope, but they lacked the speed and punch to stop a supersonic raid. What France wanted was a true interceptor, a jet that could rise vertically, fight at altitude, and never need a runway to return. The Soviets were rumored to be working on similar ideas. American defense journals speculated about atomic bombs targeting NATO airfields, and French intelligence assumed the worst. In this atmosphere, radical solutions became not just possible, but necessary. The result was a wave of projects that seemed to blur the line between science fiction and state policy. Engineers proposed tail-sitting jets, vertical lift platforms, even flying saucers. The most iconic of these, the coleoptère, was born from this climate of urgency and fear. It wasn't about chasing the future for its own sake. It was about survival, about making sure that on the worst day, France could still put a fighter in the air, even if the old rules of aviation had been bombed out of existence. The coleoptere's unusual form was the product of a methodical engineering journey, not a sudden leap. Its ancestry began with the Attar Volant test rigs, upright towers topped with turbojets, built by Snecma in the 1950s to answer a single challenge. Could pure jet thrust lift a machine straight off the ground? The earliest models, the C400 and C401, were stripped-down platforms with a cockpit perched above a bare engine. Pilots climbed in, strapped upright, and attempted to hover using only the throttle. The experience was tense and unforgiving. Engine response lagged behind every input, making the rigs feel sluggish and unpredictable. Test pilots likened it to balancing on a broomstick, where every correction arrived a moment too late. These experiments proved vertical lift was possible, but also exposed the limits of controlling a jet with only engine thrust and human reflexes. Seeking a solution, Snecma's engineers turned to a radical new geometry, the annular wing. Instead of the familiar tube and tail, they designed a ring, a continuous loop of metal encircling the fuselage. This annular wing was more than a visual signature. It served as the main lifting surface in forward flight, a rigid shell around the engine and a pressure vessel for the exhaust. With a diameter just over 3 meters, the ring allowed the coleoptère to balance upright on its tail, supported by 4 small wheels for ground handling. Once vertical, the machine stood ready to launch skyward. The ring wing wasn't just about aesthetics. Conventional wings would have blocked the jet's exhaust or forced the airframe to grow too long for vertical landings. The annular design wrapped around the thrust column, letting exhaust flow straight down while still generating lift in forward flight. But this innovation came with a trade-off. In vertical mode, the wing produced no lift at all. The entire weight of the aircraft depended on the engine's thrust. Any hesitation or engine failure left nothing between the machine and the ground. Responsibility for turning this concept into reality was split. Snecma handled the design, engine and control philosophy. Nord Aviation, experts in lightweight alloys, built the ring, fuselage and control surfaces. Together they produced the C450-01 prototype, delivered to Melun-Villaroche in early 1959. The Coléoptère's annular wing made vertical takeoff possible, but also set the stage for a new kind of challenge, the fight for stability during descent and transition. On the test stand at Melun-Villaroche, the coleoptere stood upright, lashed to a steel gantry like a spacecraft awaiting launch. The first proof of life came not from flight, but from a slow, measured hover, engine roaring, cables taut, the machine straining against its restraints. Instrument logs from April 28, 1959, record the moment the aircraft lifted 2 meters off the ground, held steady for 10 seconds, and settled back down. These early hovers were brief and controlled, but for the engineers, they were electric. Every second aloft was a challenge to gravity and to skepticism. The real breakthrough arrived on May 6, 1959. The gantry was gone. Test pilot Auguste Morel sat strapped in, ejection seat locked, hands on the throttle. At his signal, the Attar jet spooled up and the coleoptere rose, free and untethered, into the morning air. The flight log notes a climb to 75 meters, a hover, and a clean, vertical descent. On the ground, technicians watched their instruments, altitude, thrust, vibration. For 40 seconds, the impossible was routine. The ring-winged jet, a machine that looked like a flying saucer, hovered in open sky. Confidence grew with each sortie. Over the next weeks, Morel repeated the feat, climbing higher, holding longer. On May 13th, the aircraft reached 150 meters. By June, it was touching 300 meters, each time returning to Earth on its tail. The logs show a pattern. The coleoptere could rise, hover, and land if the pilot stayed within a narrow envelope. For the test team, these flights were vindication. Vertical flight was not a fantasy. For a moment, the future had weight and momentum. But every successful hover also raised a new question. What happens when you try to come back down for real without the safety net of a perfect vertical descent? On July 25, 1959, the coleoptere stood on the tarmac at Melun-Villaroche, poised for its 9th flight. Auguste Morel, the only man to have flown the machine, settled into the upright cockpit, eyes scanning a horizon that would soon vanish. The plan was simple: climb, tilt and nudge the aircraft from vertical hover toward forward flight, a maneuver that on paper would prove the concept's promise. But the coleoptere's secret danger was never ascent. The real trap waited in descent and transition, where the pilot's senses and the machine's instincts collided. As Morel pitched the nose, the annular wing caught turbulent air, and the world outside the canopy began to spin. The throttle, always a step behind, lagged against Morel's desperate corrections. The control system, relying entirely on jet thrust and small aerodynamic fins, could not keep pace with the rapidly shifting forces. Within seconds, the aircraft entered a violent oscillation, pitching and rolling at a frequency too fast for human hands to counter. Morel's logbook would later describe the sensation as the aircraft behaving like a spinning top. The horizon vanished. The cockpit's orientation, meant to keep the pilot upright, instead trapped him in a shifting frame of reference with no fixed point. At roughly 150 meters, with the oscillations worsening and the ground rushing up, Morel made the only choice left. He pulled the ejection handle. The seat fired clear, tumbling through the air as the coleoptere plunged and exploded on impact. Morel survived, battered and broken, but the sole prototype was gone. A test program lives and dies on confidence. One crash can be a data point or a verdict. The official inquiry found what the engineers already suspected. The coleoptere's control system could not stabilize the aircraft during the critical transition. The orientation trap and throttle lag combined to create a killer that no pilot could outfly. The program ended that week. No further prototypes were built. The future, so vivid in photographs, had failed the test that mattered most: a safe return to Earth. Today, engineers still chase vertical flight, but the old danger remains. Descent is where dreams break. The coleoptere proved that flight was possible, but not survivable. Some visions look perfect on paper and in photographs, but reality demands more. Aviation's future is built on risks we can actually land. What if this one had?